mentioned before, but just so you're aware that we're recording. And if, again, more reminder, if you can mute your microphone if you just came on, unless you're going to use it to speak. I kind of hear some typing and things like that. So if you can just double check that your microphone is muted, that'd be great. So we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Jared Borup. I'm here at George Mason University, just finishing my 5th year. So my primary experience has been as a candidate on the job market myself. I haven't had a lot of experience on hiring committees or anything like that. But although it's been 5 years, it's amazing how quickly time has gone by. It doesn't feel like that long ago, but that's kind of where I'm at. Leanna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Leanna Archambault. I'm an associate professor here at Arizona State University. So this is my 10th year, so I've been here at ASU for quite a while, but I have served on a number of committees to hire positions in educational technology, and I've also chaired a couple of committees. So happy to share my experience.
And then I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Catherine Shelton, and I just graduated 2 days ago with my PhD. I'm coming from Arizona State, and I work with Leanna, so it's kind of weird to say that now I'm not a student or a PhD candidate. I'm Dr. Shelton. I just took a position at CSU Stanislaus, so I'm going to be moving up to Northern California this summer to begin an assistant professor position there. So I was just on the market this last year.
Great. So what I like about this group is we're kind of all at different stages, as you can see, and so we're each going to kind of take a portion of this webinar and take the lead on it, something that we feel especially qualified to talk about. So I'm just going to start by saying, if you're interested in being a faculty member, that's a good thing. It's a great job. I love my job. There's a lot of benefit to working for a university and just a lot of enjoyment that comes from that. But I should also qualify that by saying it's a great job if you enjoy teaching and researching and mentoring and serving. Now, each university is kind of different on how much emphasis they place on any of those activities, but it's a safe bet that you'll be doing some of that. And so you should figure that out right now if that's something that you want to do. So there's probably at your university opportunities to maybe teach or TA, or to participate in research in some way, in data collection or analysis, or even mentoring kind of younger, or I shouldn't say younger, newer students in your program, and finding opportunities to serve the field and the university, right? So there's no reason why you shouldn't, even if you're brand new, why you shouldn't be looking for those types of opportunities. And I'll say one of the greatest parts about being in academia is you have flexibility, and I love this cartoon, right? It's Saturday, I can work whenever I want. Every day is Saturday, that type of thought. But then the con of that is you work on Saturdays. I will say that right now, as a PhD student, you can start practicing work-life balance. And I think that you need to find space, because nothing is going to change once you become a professor. That once you become a faculty member, you're still going to have similar responsibilities, and so you need to start figuring out what works for you, and both professionally and personally. So along with that theme, there are certain things that you really should be doing to prepare for a faculty position. The number one thing is to publish and present your research. There's lots of different types of publication outlets, and there's also lots of different types of conferences that you can present at. There are university or state or national or international conferences or journals, and so you should start thinking about publishing, even in your course projects. Oftentimes you'll take a course and you'll conduct interviews, and you might do an IRB and things like that, or you might start analyzing some data. Well, you can go a little bit further, and you can actually start publishing that work in some way or presenting on that work in some way. When I was a doc student, there were multiple articles that were actually started as class projects that I ended up publishing in journals. So don't rule that out. It takes a little extra work, but it'll really pay off. The other thing is that you should find opportunities to teach, especially online. If you start looking at job postings, it's very likely that somewhere on there it'll say they're looking for someone who is able to teach online. So that's in pretty much any field. Online learning is growing, and so they're looking for people to kind of fill those positions. And even if you don't have the opportunity to teach online, there's quite possibly a course about teaching online at your university that you could take to kind of show that you have some skills to do that, or you develop some skills to teach online. The other thing that I look for is opportunities to serve the field. So this could be as simple as volunteering at a conference where you're handing out badges and things like that, but that's a start. You can also talk with your chair or someone on your dissertation committee and see if you can't shadow review journal articles or things like that, right? There's oftentimes student organizations, and so you can start serving in that way. But it's kind of helpful to have some kind of track record of service as well during this time. The other thing that you can start doing is creating an online presence. You will be Googled when you're on the job market, and so you want to control what they see as much as you can. You can't control everything, but you can start a blog that's public, that you can start sharing some things that you're learning in your courses and stuff like that. And you want to control at least some of those hits on the first page as much as you can. And social media is a great way to kind of establish your presence as well. You should also practice talking about your research. Oftentimes you'll go to a family reunion and your aunt will say, you know, what are you doing? And you'll think, oh, well, they don't really care. And so you don't really get into it with them. Get into it with them. It's a great opportunity. You have a captive audience. Your aunt is going to listen to you, or whoever it is, your neighbor will listen to you. And so it's important to start practicing that mini pitch of your research, you know, and so you can start doing that with friends and family, as well as other students in the program or any people in the grocery store, you know, whoever's willing to listen to you, you can start talking about your research. Also, I think it's really important to maintain personal interests and hobbies. Oftentimes as students, we kind of don't find personal time. And so then we're not that interesting to talk about. I mean, not everyone is going to want to talk about, you know, indicators of social presence in online discussion boards, or whatever your discussion or dissertation topic is. And so when you're on the job market, you're going to have a lot of downtime where you're just talking about things, right? And so you should have personal interests. You should know what's going on in the world. The other thing I want to direct you to, at the end of this presentation, we'll have additional resources, but I actually wrote an article about networking at conferences, and Abby Hawkins, who is also a doc student with me, published something similar. And then we combined that, Tanya Green combined that into this open access book, so it's free, you can access it. But chapter 47, we give more specific advice on how to really make conferences work for you. Probably the best advice I got was really just shake hands when you go to conferences, and you don't even have to be very good at it. You know, just shake hands. It can be kind of awkward, but introduce yourself to people and get to know them. People will want to get to know you, but you can also be pretty strategic on whose hands you're shaking. So you can kind of look at job postings, be proactive at looking at the conference agenda, proceedings, and kind of figuring out who can I talk to from these universities, and go to their sessions or things like that. And some conferences will actually have a job board, either digital or physical, that you can kind of go to and see what's available. And sometimes they'll even have business cards of faculty members that you can go and talk to. So make use of those connections, and you can be pretty strategic on who you're speaking to while you're at the conferences. Okay, I'll turn the time over to Whitney.
Okay.
Or,
So
or Catherine, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll jump in and talk a little bit about the process of applying. This is really fresh from my own experience. I'll talk a little bit about the timeline in detail, but I probably, from about last year this time until February, I think is when I kind of resolved my job and accepted and everything. So the last 9 months or so, it's kind of like having another baby or something. Jared, will you advance the slides for me? Is that how it'll work? Okay, thanks. So the timeline for applying, I started really seriously thinking about applications last July. I, much like many of you, was kind of wrapping up semester stuff in May and June. I finished my proposal and then I kind of took a breath and got in. I created email alerts. I'll give you in a second a list of some of the websites that I liked to use for looking for jobs and that Jared and Leanna like to use as well. But on those sites, I created email alerts. I did make a big job spreadsheet, a big Excel file, which I'll show you an example of as well. I began drafting a cover letter, my CV, my statements. They were messy at first, but it helped me in July when I had a little bit more time to just kind of get things on paper and get things down. Then came August. I started checking for jobs regularly in August. It feels early, but some of the best jobs that are posted early. Stanford had like 3 jobs posted last year that were exciting. I applied for them, just to give it the good old college try, right? But so some of the top institutions will have early postings. I updated my spreadsheet on a regular basis and I started calendaring things. So I was meticulous about the deadlines for when things were due and when I needed to email and when I needed to respond back and all of that, because there's a lot going on in your mind at that time. In August, I also got a final version of my draft and my cover letter and CV and statements pulled together. I asked friends and mentors to look at my materials, anybody who was willing to kind of help. I had my mom read a version of it as well, just to kind of get a nice solid version that then I could work off of to build the personalized version of the cover letter for each institution, the personalized version of the CV. Yes, I did change my CV for probably every position that I applied to, just tailoring it to that institution and that job. And then came from then until May, currently, I was just looking for jobs and, sending off applications. I did just see today on one of my email alerts a position that's open for this fall. So even, May 9th, there are new positions still being posted. So just to kind of have that in the back of your head. So then on the next slide, thanks Jared, here was my list that I put together of where to find job postings. I highlighted my 2 favorites in yellow. Those are the ones that I frequented the most, but I did find, useful posts on all of these, to be honest. A lot of them have the email alert option where you can sign up. I know I still get emails from AERA. I think they email monthly. Others email weekly. Higher ed jobs email several times a week. So I got those. If you're looking for a different type of position, I liked that versatilephd.com. Has some more interesting, different postings. You will see a lot of duplicates across these sites. So I think at the beginning, when I first kind of started in August looking, I kind of frequented all of them. And then I found the ones that I liked the best, the way the searchability worked for me and that I understood. And then I kind of zoomed in on those 2. And so Chronicle and Higher Ed Jobs were the 2 that I looked at more often than not. So then on the next slide, so email alerts, I do recommend creating those because if you get busy for a week or 2 doing your dissertation or life or whatever, the email alerts will still come in. So just an example, if you go to higheredjobs.com, you do have to create an account. So write down your password and all that. And then on the right-hand side under my account, it's called Job Agents. And so you can create different job agents for profiles of jobs that you're looking for. So you can see that I have one that That's why I get multiple emails. It's daily, right? Daily when posted. So when stuff comes up, Higher Ed Jobs shoots an email over to me. I'd say maybe 70% of the jobs are relevant, 30% are I just throw it out, but it was worth it to me to get the email alerts, so then I didn't have to worry about logging in all the time or missing something. I also made a little list for myself. I did end up getting a position in California, and that was one of the places where we really were willing to move as far as my family. So I did look and found institutions in California that I would be interested in applying to specifically. And I found their job websites. So that might be another place to, keep a little file for yourself of schools that you'd be interested in just checking up on periodically. Okay, so how did I organize? I organized with a spreadsheet because I have Excel skills. Next slide. Here's one of the spreadsheets that I used. I had several. This one was a shared spreadsheet. So this was something a little different. I shared this with, there was about 10 of us who participated in putting this together in my cohort of my PhD program at Arizona State. And so whenever we found something that was a job call that was or wasn't right for us, but might have been relevant to anybody that we knew in the group, we would post the details for each other here. And it felt kind of nice because you're getting a lot of emails and you're spending time looking on these websites, and it can feel frustrating sometimes to spend 30 minutes looking through and not see a single ed tech position that fits your profile, but you found a really great literacy, elementary literacy position that fits your really good friend, so you can post it up there for them. So I liked having this, and it kind of made me feel reassured that I wasn't missing anything. I had a lot of fear of missing out with this job market search thing. In the back of my head, I kept thinking, what if something gets posted and I just don't see it and it's the perfect job? Like, that would be a nightmare, right? So this made me feel a little bit more self-assured. And I think it kind of goes back to Jared's comment of the shaking hands thing, right? So the more people who know what you're going after and who are looking out for you, the better. And so that can be your peers, which we are all working on the spreadsheet together, or it can be your advisor's peers, former teachers or anybody that you've worked with who can kind of, have their ear out for you. So if we go to the next one, this was, and then on my own personal spreadsheet that I did, not the group shared one, I included these columns. I thought this might be helpful as you kind of think about organizing your own. Deadlines was a big thing. So you see a posting and maybe you have a month or 3 weeks to put together your materials, but I didn't want to forget when things were due. So that was always my first column. And then I put in the school. I was interested in whether it was a public or private institution, and also the classification. If you guys have gone to the Carnegie classifications, that's a nice site where you can learn more about the profile of the school. It used to be like if it was an R1 or an R2, but now they have the different terms, and you can find those in the Carnegie classifications.edu. And then I also included the URL. I always downloaded the material as well, because you never know if the URL will go away. And then I listed the qualifications and required documents. So in those couple of weeks before it was due, I could really start thinking about what I needed to put together for my submission. Okay, and then the next slide. So preparing your materials. This was a list of things that I got asked for in the process of the handful of jobs that I applied for. So I had all of these things ready. I never had to write a diversity statement for any of the ones that I applied for, but I really love that idea and think that it's something good to maybe start thinking about, because that's one where you might want to put a little bit more time and effort into that. Okay, so then the next slide. This is an example of the materials that I submitted for the job that I got at CSU Stanislaus. So I tried to be really consistent and simple in my presentation. I always titled my materials with my last name and then what it was. There was no extra, version 2.0, new, dated, nothing like that. It was just short and sweet. I used the ASU logos for all of that and tried to keep my headings pretty consistent. One other thing that I'll mention was in the cover letters, I embraced using bullet points, which I think was probably a suggestion from both Jared and Leanna, I think. And I think that was a good move. Headers, bullet points, nothing too crazy, but I thought it was something that made it a little bit more readable. So then on the next slide, here's one of the job calls. This is the job call for the position that I took. Just to give you an idea of kind of how I put together the cover letter and all that, I would go through the call and highlight exactly what they were looking for keywords, looking for things that I knew I needed to address. They're going to read your cover letter, and based on what you say, they're going to say, oh, they're in or they're out. So you're in if you mention that you meet their minimum qualifications, if you can prove that on your CV and your cover letter. So I really clearly went through and saw what they really wanted to see, and then I wanted to be sure to address that in my materials. Okay, next slide. This comes from Jared, and it's a really useful piece of advice, is to really put yourself in the committee's shoes, right? So these comments are written by committee members. They say, when you're reading 20 to 30 cover letters, the one that sounds as being from someone who understands our department and authentically expresses a desire to be at our school can really stand out. And then I can't read that bottom piece, but you get the idea. These people are reading 80, cover letters. So you're going to really want to be selling yourself to them and remembering how you can make things as simple and easy for the committee to read and be engaged and excited about you. So then, to summarize, in your application materials, be sure to follow these kind of 4 tenets is what really kind of structured the way that I put together my stuff. 1, show that you know the university, the college, and the department. So you've done your research. You're not kind of applying blindly. Every cover letter is going to be perfectly tailored to that position in that school. 2, specifically address the required and preferred qualifications, so showing that you would be eligible for the position. 3 is selling yourself, and this was something that I spent a long time kind of thinking about. How do I want to sell myself? Who am I? I've done a whole bunch of stuff in graduate school, and I jumped in on this project and that project, and I took this class, but who am I? And thinking about kind of your little elevator speech of who you are and how they'll remember you as a unique individual. And then 4 is how you will add value. They obviously need somebody who's going to contribute to the department and keep things going, and that you can prove that you can add value. So showing evidence that you have strong teaching credentials, showing evidence that you are a team player, telling anecdotes, providing quotes from student evaluations, all sorts of ways that you can really prove that you are a good contribution for them. And I liked this quote, it was clear when someone had a vision for what they might do and when they were just looking for a job. So you don't want to just present a generic application. They get 80 of those for the position, right? They're going to pull out the 10 that are really exciting and appealing to them. So be yourself and put yourself out there. If they don't want who you are, it's not the right fit, and that's okay. The last step is to send it off. Sans typos. I have an embarrassing thing that I think I told Leanna. I think I told her. I don't know. I might have even been too embarrassed to tell. I had a typo in my subject line of my submission email for the position that I got. So don't do that. Application. To my credit, my baby was 13 days old at the time that I sent that off. So I give myself a little bit of grace, but just be sure to double check all those things, maybe make a draft and then read through it the next day and then send it. But you can see just how simple and kind of organized and transparent I tried to be in all of the submission process. So I think that's all on kind of the applying piece, and then we'll jump over to Leanna.
Thank you, Catherine. It's so great to see your kind of growth in this process and how much you've learned along the way. I think, as Catherine mentioned, when we're trying to when we're serving on a committee, and that's how I'm going to kind of approach this from the committee's point of view. So when we're serving on a search committee and we get 80 to 100 applications, having that cover letter tailored to what the call is, because we really have to put them in two piles. Like, okay, either it exhibited evidence of meeting the qualifications or it didn't. So that's kind of the first call. And then we narrow it down, and typically there might be 10 to 12 narrowing from that original pool. And then we're going to go to the phone interview. So as part of the phone interview, it's as much as it is not to be excluded as it is to be included. So you're really trying to, as part of the phone interview, you're trying to get to be that 2 or 3 that are invited to campus. So it's very important at all levels. I think the number one thing that I can suggest is doing your research, even for the phone interview. And that is making sure that you look up who's on the committee, that you're aware of their lines of research. You kind of have, you look at there's so much available online these days. You look at the university, you look at the department, the mission of the university. I think the more informed you can be, the better off you are at all stages of the interview process. A lot of folks are doing Skype interviews or Zoom interviews, so especially dressing the part. And this is always an old tip, is that if you're formally dressed, you're going to kind of, if you're dressed the part, you're going to play the part. And so, especially if there's video involved, I think that that's a critical thing that will help you along the way. Also, you're going to want to find a quiet, private place where you won't be interrupted. And this is kind of the, as Jared mentioned, we don't think about our dogs or the UPS guy coming by, or any number of things that can happen in the midst of an interview that can be distractions. So I think figuring out a quiet, private place to do the phone interview is very, very important. Also having a cheat sheet handy. This is where this research comes in handy, because you can have this available, you can have notes and I think even just the process of going through to create something like that, you will be more familiar with the information, even if you don't end up using it, but it's by the side in case you want to refer to it. So I would always suggest having notes, having that available in case you want to take a look at it. And doing your homework. This goes hand in glove. Knowing the call, knowing what they're looking for, and tailoring yourself to meet what they're looking for. And I think that's why it's important, is that you don't want to have this just one generic, you do want to be authentic to yourself, but you also want to be able to morph a little bit and kind of show how you would be, a great fit for what they're looking for. Be familiar with common interview questions. These are out there on the internet, and we've sent out the link to the presentation, so you can click. This is a hot link with some common interview questions, and I believe many of these, Jared, were from your experience in serving on the for job searches that you've been, or that you were involved with or did. So
yeah, I actually reached out to people that I knew had searches recently, and they provided me with their interview questions. So these are interview questions that have been used recently.
Yeah, so those are great. There's also, if you search just common interview questions or phone interview questions, academic, there's a lot of different resources out there. So I think just familiarizing yourself with the common interview questions. The thing to know is that there's a standard script. So it has to be consistent from one interview candidate to the next. Those will not deviate. So there are a set number of questions. So it's important that you answer those questions, but that you don't go on and on at length. And sometimes that can be difficult because you're on the phone. If you're on the phone and maybe you don't have that video component to see eye contact or kind of read the room, even if you're on video, it's hard to read the room. So I think it's important to answer that question, and then, make sure that you're budgeting your time. The important thing is not to ramble, because some of us, myself included, chief among us, when we get nervous, we tend to go on and on and on. And that's, you want to respect the time frame. And if it's a 20-minute time frame and you haven't gotten through all of the questions, unfortunately, that's all the committee can allow to keep things consistent. So just make sure that you're budgeting time frames so that you make it to the next cut, which is the campus interview. So next slide, Jared.
And I'll also say they'll always give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the phone interview too, if there's time, right? So have those ready for those interviews.
Yeah, exactly. And those are important too. And any of that you don't get to, you block it for the campus interview and use those in the future. In terms of campus interview, one of the important things to remember that sometimes candidates forget is that you were on the entire time, from the time that you land at the airport and someone picks you up to all the way through until you get on that airplane to go home. So all of the meals, all of the walking from place to place, any coffee breaks, all of that, you are being interviewed. So there's not, I mean, even though it might feel informal, and some of those are informal, but all of that's still information, and you never know. You just want to make sure that you're aware, because you know, it can be a side comment or something that is said that kind of sets somebody off and can kind of derail things a little bit. So it's just important to know that, okay, this is, even when I'm on campus and when I'm a part of this, I'm being evaluated at all stages of communication. I think the important thing is to avoid common mistakes, and the biggest mistake that I see is candidates don't come in having done their research. So you need to know a little bit about what the university, you know, you want to ask questions about the university and the program, but you also want to have a working knowledge of what's happened in the history. You want to know a little bit about the faculty members, their background. You know, you just want to make sure that you have prepared adequately. And I think that reflects well on candidates that are well prepared. That reflects well on the outcome and how they do. It's not, you know, I think as a committee, if we ask, you know, what are some of the classes that you might be interested in teaching in our program, and you have no familiarity with the program, that's a problem. So I think you just need to make sure that you do your homework before you go on this campus interview. Also, being confident, you certainly want to sell yourself, but not that, you know, but you also want to guard against being too confident. So you don't want to ever project to the committee that, oh, you have this in the bag, that this is a done deal. You know, I think that can derail things also. I've seen that happen as well. And so I think it's important to project kind of your self-efficacy and your confidence, but not to the point where it's off-putting, and it's a fine balance. But I think you don't ever want to assume that you have it in the bag. And then I think you take a positive outlook on the position, you get that offer, and then you worry about the specifics later. So you don't want to ever say, well, would I have to teach X class? You know, that's something, and that has happened. That is a real world example of a question that was asked. And that just is very, very off-putting to a committee. You want to make sure that you take a positive outlook on the position, and then worry about the specifics later. Worry about the negotiation part later. So that would be my suggestions about the campus visit. In terms of a packing list, I think formal wear for an interview as well as business casual for like dinners. It's good to have a variety of both so you can kind of tailor. Having a notebook and jotting down questions, especially for that second day, things that you want to follow up on, contact information, just questions that you have. I think a notebook is great. Business cards, if you have them, if you're meeting, a lot of times you'll meet people from other from other parts of the campus. So being able to have those just in case. Breath mints are never a bad idea, and certainly water, and especially if you're coming to an arid desert region like ASU, always good to have a water bottle handy, and also your throat just gets dry from talking so much. So I think that is a great piece of advice. I also made a research binder. So this is where I compiled, when I interviewed 10 years ago, I put faculty bios, articles, all the information about the university, the program, my questions. And actually, you know, it wasn't a bad thing for me to be able to, like, in the committee interview, to pull out the interview or you know, to pull out my notebook, my binder, and flip through it. I mean, they were kind of like, it was like, oh, you've done your preparation. I don't think it's bad to be able to pull out a binder or a notebook and refer, especially when they ask you, you know, what questions do you have for us? Have those prepared. Also, courses that you've taught, as well as information about their program and where the courses that you've taught might fit. That's one of the biggest questions. It's so nuts and bolts, but it's really good to have that prepared and bring that with you. And then a lot of questions. I mean, there are a lot, sometimes whenever the default is, when there's kind of a lull in the conversation, it's going to be, well, what questions do you have for us? So having as many of those chambered and kind of thoughtful questions, especially that helps if you've read the faculty members' bios and their bios and also their research. You can kind of ask questions about the research. If you get them talking about the research, they're going to feel A, validated, and B, it kind of carries the conversation. So I think that's asking a lot of questions is a great strategy. In terms of your research talk, I think this is always a challenge to figure out, but you certainly want to respect the time frame that they give you, figure out a topic that's going to be appealing to a broad audience, because there's going to be faculty members, they might be from different departments, there'll be oftentimes doc students, so it's just a kind of a variety of who might be there. So I think picking a broad topic is important. You want to practice, but you don't want to, and you want to have it like prepared, but you don't want it to sound rote or memorized. So I think it's important to be natural, to kind of have it down, but be able to kind of go off on a certain direction if you're asked a question. So make sure that you're prepared, but not overly memorizing stuff. The other thing is be careful about name dropping. So if you know someone's work is, they're going to be in the talk, they're on the committee or whatever. If they're the seminal person, fine, put them in your presentation. But if not, it can really seem like pandering. So I think just kind of be judicious about name dropping and who, especially if you're trying to ingratiate yourself, that can go either way. So if they're a seminal person, I think it's great to cite their work. If not, I don't think it's mandatory. Show how different, you have different lines that your research could go, different directions. So not just your research talk, but kind of like, what are the two or three areas that you could see yourself going in? Because that's really what the committee is looking for. Do you have a trajectory? That's one of the key components. So I think having your main talk, but then also talking about other directions at the end that you're interested in exploring, I think that's really helpful. Hitting the implication section is really important, kind of addressing that so what question without kind of overstating your claims, but really thinking about the impact of your research on the overall field is important, as well as leaving time, obviously, for questions and discussion. So like the phone interview, budgeting your time, but not going over. Realizing that there's a set amount of time and that you have to, especially on a campus visit where everything is so scheduled, you need to really make sure that if you're asked to speak for 30 minutes, you're speaking for 30 minutes and that you don't go over. In terms of the dean interview, and this might be at ASU, our dean doesn't always, so it might be the associate dean. Know their backgrounds. And so look up the dean or know who the administrative person is who you're going to be interviewing with, and know that the dean is the one who ultimately makes the hiring decision. So the committee makes a recommendation to the dean, but the dean is the one who ultimately extends that offer. So it's important not to rub the dean the wrong way, of course, that goes without saying, but if you know their background, especially we have an associate dean here who's a huge Michigan person. And if you mention Michigan State, that's like shooting yourself in the foot. So you want to know that background and kind of know those rivalries and not make that mistake. And you want to ask them questions that are opening. So these are some great examples from Jared, like things that are kind of rote answers, like how many faculty are there? What classes will I be teaching? Those aren't good questions for the dean. But talking about, what are some of the things you're most proud of? Or what's your vision for the college? Or, how have things evolved during your time as dean? I think those open-ended questions, it's really demonstrating to the dean that you're a good fit. Funny story, the dean asked me when I was interviewing, what's your greatest weakness, which is a pretty common question. And I said, well, I have a real hard time saying no. I agree to just about anything. And she was like sold at that point. That was the perfect answer because that's how it is around here. We do everything. So that was good. So Jared is going to talk a little bit about negotiating.
Yeah, so thank you. So depending on what type of university you're applying to, you'll probably have a research doc, or you might even like have a teaching demonstration or something like that if it's more of a teaching institution. But really, like Leanna said, work on it, but don't memorize it. Be natural, things like that. So okay, so you've gone through this long process for who knows how many months. In the end, hopefully you get an email that basically says, hey, we're excited about you joining our faculty and talking to you about that, right? And if it's the institution that you're really gunning for, um, angels sing, it's amazing. You know, it's like, me? This is great. This is not happening. And then they'll say, I will call you to discuss the offer with you. Like, oh, okay. Like, what do I do in this conversation? If you're anything like me, coming from education, you've never negotiated a job offer before. Like, I taught K-12, you don't negotiate your salary. Everyone gets the same pay, right? So you might ask yourself, should I negotiate? And so my dean here at Mason, our College of Education, is Mark Ginsberg. And I asked him, you know, what advice do you have? And he said, always negotiate. It's expected. Okay. Now, when you're negotiating, you want to do a little homework first. So you don't want to make outrageous demands. You want to negotiate your salary first, but do your homework. So, for instance, in Virginia, our state uh, has all the salaries published online, right? So you can kind of figure out, you know, I met this person, he was kind of new or she was kind of new. Let's find out what they're earning. And so you can actually go back different years and things like that. Different states are may not be as open to that, but try to do as much homework as you can about what kind of is expected with salary. You have very few opportunities to negotiate your salary. Basically, when you're hired, and but even if you have a great year as a faculty member, it's not like you necessarily can go to your dean and say, hey, you know, I had 4 publications, can I get a raise? You know, it's not business or industry. Basically, unless you have an offer in hand, you can't really negotiate. So so make use of that. One strategy that I use, like I said, I didn't have a lot of experience, but I have family members that's what they do in the corporate world. And so one thing you want to do is just make sure that they know that you're excited about going there, right? You know, I'm really thrilled that we're having this conversation. This is one of my top picks. I'm still trying to weigh my options. Can there be any movement on the salary, right? Something as simple as that. Let them kind of counter their offer. And then if it's not quite there, you could say, you know, I was really hoping for someone a little bit more in this area, right? And you'll kind of get to a point where you know they can't go anymore, right? And they'll probably tell you that, and I believe them when they tell you that. Don't push them too hard, but you should negotiate. One reason why they can't go too far is all the salaries are publicly available, right? At least the faculty members. And so if you're coming in, they don't want you to be, you know, earning way more than people that have been there for a few years, right? That causes some issues. So you'll kind of reach a point where salary is probably where it's going to be, but then they have more flexibility on one-time offers. So for instance, like research funds and GRA hours, a course release. You know, you might want to go to different conferences as a new faculty member, so you can negotiate more travel funds or moving expenses, summer pay, equipment. All these things are important, but when you ask for them, you should align it to you being successful at their institution, and they want you to be successful. So if you do that, they're probably more open to giving you some of those, some of that funding or perks. Okay, Leanna. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, that helps. If you want to be looking at alternatives, because let's say you're geographically bound you have a child in school who needs to finish, or for whatever reasons, or there aren't any good there aren't any good calls that really are good fits, or they're not in the area that you want to relocate to. I think there are a lot of different alternatives that you can pursue. So when you're looking at alternatives beyond getting a tenure track job, I think networking is key when considering your options. So networking with not only your advisor and your advisor's list of contacts, but there might be other folks that you know around your university. I think a lot of times people get placements in jobs because they talk to someone, and maybe that person knew somebody and was like, oh, I know a great position for you. So I think networking is key, and talking to as many people as possible in and around your institution is very helpful to let them know, hey, I'm looking for something, be it for, a year or whatever the time frame might be. There's a lot of different possibilities that exist. So there might be a postdoc available, or a grant, or a staff position. So there might be an assistant director or some type of coordinator position that you could take in the interim before going on the tenure track and going on the job search. There might be a visiting or clinical line that's available. So teaching, taking a full-time teaching position, or even adjunct teaching. So there's a lot of different possibilities. You might need to kind of cobble together a few things, and I think you can, especially with adjunct teaching, maybe there's a part-time grant position, maybe there's a couple of different things that come together. Whatever it is, if you do want to go into academia, it's very important to keep your research agenda as active as possible. So if you take something on the alternative route, you still want to be publishing as if you had taken a tenure track job, so you still want to be working on publications, because as a search committee member, that's what we're really interested in. Is even if you have some work experience, that's great, but we're really looking at that CV and what the last few years look like in terms of publications, because the search committee, ultimately, they want to know that you can teach. But if you're at a research, if you're applying to a research intensive university like ASU, we're really looking at kind of consistency of publications and what journals you're getting into, and does that show promise for kind of a career, a faculty tenure track career. So there's different options. And Jared, you want to talk about additional resources?
Yeah, I got to unmute too. So we covered a lot here. Obviously, you can view the recording, but there are some great resources. I'm going to point you back to this open access book. There's a chapter 50 on careers in academia, and part of that is getting a job. Tomorrow's Professor, this is published in 1997, which was the year I graduated from high school, so it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it is. But it's still kind of timeless advice that you can look to. And then Catherine recommended the Professor is In book.
Yeah, she has a blog as well where a lot of that content is freely available. And I read her blog several times and thought, this is worth the, $13 to buy it. She's kind of a New Yorker. She tells it like it is. So if you like that type of dialogue, it might work for you.
Great. Okay, so thank you for coming. We're going to stick around for any questions that you might have. If you don't have any questions, or if you just want to lurk, that's fine. But if you want to go, that's fine too. But we really appreciate you taking the time for coming, and we hope that some of it was helpful. So any questions?
Looks like Ron's asking for advice, someone looking for a clinical position, not necessarily research focused. Ron, for that, I think being able to demonstrate kind of the innovative teaching style that you have and being able to document might be helpful to have some type of portfolio, even being able to share evaluations or comments from students that you've had in the past. And that's something that actually brings up a good point. Some interviews may want to have a teaching demonstration. So honing in on that teaching aspect, or being able to create a video with a teaching demonstration to really be able to sell your expertise in the teaching area, I think would be important. And getting good, solid letters of recommendation as well.
So, Keith, Keith, are you at BYU?
Yeah, I'm at BYU still.
Oh, hey, yeah. So how many publications per year? It's, I would say 2 to 3.
Yeah.
What would you say, Leanna? Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, no one will
at
tell
least
you, but-
2. 2 is good. I mean, I think even if you have 1, that's fine. But two typically.
Hey, we good to see you, Keith. It's been a while.
I was going to say too, if you don't have publications that are, maybe they're just recently submitted, I did include like articles in press or in progress section on my CV because, if you're in a 4-year graduate program, it's hard to get stuff through. So that was a way to at least highlight that I was working on stuff beyond the couple of publications that I had.
And I think if you also, to add to that, if you're going to cite, it's good to have a separate section like proceedings. So those are a type of publication, wouldn't be necessarily, kind of like to the level of a journal article, but it shows kind of that consistency and submitting and attending conferences. I think those are good to include on a section on your CV as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Missy asked about online teaching positions, and I can tell you in those sources that I mentioned in the table, Chronicle and Higher Ed Jobs, all the others, they do have occasional online positions posted. From what I had seen, they looked more adjunct style, but I can tell you my position was a traditional position posted, and then once I got to the interview, I found out that half of it is online. So, if that helps, maybe Missy.
So Blake asked about parallels between working in student affairs administrative roles and teaching. Yeah, I think Leanna can probably answer this better, but I think that with teaching, it's mentoring, and I could kind of see that as a bridge between the two roles.
Yeah, I think being able to demonstrate kind of being student-centered and how you've worked with students, but I would still, if you're in an administrative role and you're interested in a tenure track position and making that move, doing some adjunct teaching or still having some experience in teaching would be very helpful.
One thing that I don't think I touched on is a lot of organizations will have awards specifically for students. And so look for those and apply for those too. That's something that you can do now. So someone was just mentioning at the start how she won a dissertation award. So there's kind of different organizations will kind of give dissertation awards too, in addition to your university.
And I think too, just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, leverage your faculty mentors network. So a lot of times they will know colleagues at other universities, and they will even know that positions are coming out even before they're announced. It doesn't get you the job, but sometimes it might get your foot, kind of give you a heads up, and your advisor can kind of help make that connection. So it's very important to kind of be in communication with your advisor and what you're looking for, what type of position you're looking for, so they can help leverage their network.
Yeah, so as far as listing travel grants, yes, I would list that. Anytime you receive funding, I would put it on your CV.
Yeah, Medha, I kind of lumped all of those together as one line because I felt like you don't want to say you got travel funding every single quarter of every single year. It was just a way in my mind to prove that you were capable of submitting small local grants and winning those. And so one line with just the dates was the way that I did it.
Okay, that sounds good.
And that's great about a CV, right? I mean, you can include everything. I included like under teaching experience, coaching, things like that. So So you can if you feel like it's relevant, you can put it. It's where you position it though can make a difference too. You don't want little things to bury kind of bigger activity that you want them to see.
And is it important to provide course details in the CV, or you just name the course and give the title of the course and that's good enough? The courses that you have taught.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of list them, but I've seen other CVs where they actually list the courses and then it's kind of a table and then it has like enrollment and then their overall rating for that course or something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Leanna? What have you seen?
I think for your CV, you can just list the name of the course, but you might also, like on the top of your CV, have your website, and then on your website have the description of the course, have the title and the description of the course. I think that way, if they're looking for, good, yeah. More detail. I mean, that's the other thing we didn't even talk on. I think it's important to have a web presence because faculty search committees will look you up online to see what's out there. So you want to make sure that you're managing your digital footprint, that you have a website, that they can find more information if they're interested, and that there's not anything out there that you don't want your name associated with.
And if there is, just bury it.
That's right.
The other detail that I added about the courses that I had teaching experience with was whether they were online or hybrid or face-to-face. So I had like a little parentheses for each course so they knew what the format was. I think so many places are looking for online teaching experience that I wanted to highlight that.
And you might also want to indicate too, you could do a little asterisk if you developed the course versus just the course. So, or if you helped with the development, I think that's always good to indicate as well.
There was another question from Missy a little bit earlier. It said, is it true that we have a deadline moving into academia if we're in an alternative path currently?
I don't think, I can only speak from here at ASU. I think we've considered folks that have been in an alternative path for, 4 or 5 years, as long as they have an active research agenda. That's the critical component. If the research is active, and they're publishing, I think the role that they're in is less important.
Okay, so our email addresses are here. So if you think of something and you want to reach out, feel free to do that. But thank you for coming and best of luck. I know that it can be stressful, but yeah, thank you, Leanna, for putting that in there. But just prepare the best that you can. I think that's the best advice. So thank you again.
Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Yes, thanks, Jared, for organizing. You did a fantastic job, and I think this is really helpful information for folks.
Yeah, thank you. So did you stop recording, Leanna? You're muted.
Stopping recording.
Okay.